Okay, you know the 6 major ways that students plagiarize. How do you avoid it? How do you fix it? If you found that you've already done it and you haven't submitted your paper, or your professor caught you and gave your paper back, if they're nice, maybe they'll let you completely rewrite your paper. Okay, maybe you have caught that you've done it in the past and you want to try to fix it so you don't do it in the future. So what do? We're going to go through some examples and we're going to talk about how to fix it in this video. It's not an easy fix and it's going to take some practice, but I know that you can do it. Okay, the first thing you want to do is just change your habits on how you go about getting your research and what you do with the information. So the very first thing is going to be my golden rule, right? Never, ever, 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 ever copy and paste, meaning don't use anything verbatim. Never, 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 never. If you're digital, do not go to source and right click to copy and drag your mouse and then hit Control V or right click and paste. Never do that. If you're looking at a hard copy, never stare at the copy and type verbatim thinking you're going to change it or you're going to try to do anything to it. There is no amount of changes you can do to keep it from being plagiarism. Okay, so never, never, never copy and paste. Okay, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. Okay, don't copy and paste, and also don't look at the source. Don't look at the original source because you want things to come from your own mind. Okay, even if you want to use a couple really important words from the author or maybe the big picture of the original author's thoughts, ideas, and concepts, you still don't want to risk not being genuine enough or uniquely your own enough that it's going to be plagiarized. Okay, so don't copy and paste and don't stare directly at the original source and think you're going to change it like word by word. With this, don't go sentence by sentence. When I catch it, what I notice a lot of times is that even if some of the words are different or a student does any or a combination of the 5 that we just talked about, it will be, I look at the original source and it's still sentence by sentence, right? So it shows me that they copied and pasted and that they've changed a little bit the order, they've dropped words, they've added words, they've swapped words, they've done the 5, but from the original text, it's still sentence by sentence, the exact same material. Okay, that's not your own ideas, thoughts, or concepts. Okay, so you want it to be your own thoughts, ideas, and concepts. Well, how do you come up with your own thoughts, ideas, and concepts? Well, you understand the material. You have to understand the material, right? So what I find a lot of times is students, when they get caught plagiarizing, is they say there's no way for them to say the same thing as the author. If they change it, if they put it in their own words or they change that, it's going to have a different meaning. And what I say is that if you're only trying to get one sentence and that's what you think is the only important sentence, first of all, that's completely wrong. But second of all, if you feel you have to cheat because you don't know another way to say that one sentence, you don't know the material. So again, the purpose, and this kind of blows my mind, but the purpose of doing a research project or writing an essay is to learn, to really have a deep understanding of the subject matter. So if you want to say one sentence the way the author said it and you can't think of any other way to say it or to talk about that topic in general, you don't know the material. So the way to stop plagiarizing is to know the material. Students that plagiarize, they're not trying to learn the material, is they just they're cheating because they don't want to spend the time, or they don't want to spend the resources, or maybe they feel like I understand that the writing itself, sometimes just the length of the writing gets really stressful, and I remember feeling that as well when I was an undergrad student. So I completely understand it, but you want to avoid all of these things, right? So you want to take the time to learn the material yourself. Okay, so we have never, never, never copy and paste, so no verbatim words, right? Unless you're going to use the couple important words and then apply the 3 elements from the rule. Okay, so you want to avoid doing the 6 things, the 6 ways of plagiarizing. Don't copy and paste. Don't look directly at the original source when you are doing your writing. Okay, if your eyeballs are looking at the original source, it doesn't matter what you tell yourself to change those, you're going to end up with doing one of the first 5 things on the list of the 6 naughty no-nos. Don't look at the original source. Just don't do it. Turn it over, throw it across the room, burn it safely in a trash can, whatever you have to do. Do not look at the original source, okay? Don't look at the original source when you do your writing. If you're not looking at it, you cannot plagiarize it, okay? So again, as we discussed in a previous video, if you can't sit down and have a conversation with a friend or with your professor on what you just read from the source, you don't want to use that source, and you probably aren't prepared to start writing. Remember that you don't want to start actually writing until you know everything there is to know about your subject. So if you in your mind can discuss, and if you know your topic so well that you're like, okay, I'm ready to write, not because it's Thursday and you want to go out on Friday and you want to get your paper written. You don't just sit down and start writing, right? There's a whole lot that you do before you sit down and start writing. So we don't want to do that. So you want to learn all the material, know the material before you ever start writing. Okay, which means you're going to go to a lot of different sources. You're going to get the knowledge. I know that sounds crazy. You're going to learn, you're going to get the knowledge, and you're going to digest and process the knowledge, and you're going to make it your own, right? So you're going to get an ingredient from here, an ingredient from here, an ingredient from all your different sources. You're going to put them together, you're going to bake it, and when it comes out, it's still something that used all the sources, but it's something completely different. It's your own, right? It's your own wisdom coming out onto the paper. If you're not at that point, you're not ready to write. And if you're plagiarizing, you're probably not ready to write. Okay, so we're gonna never copy and paste verbatim. We're not going to look at our original source. We're not gonna start writing too early. And we're going to read. The next thing is read as much of that one source that you're using. Read as much as you can. Read as much as you have time for. If you are skimming it and you find one exact sentence that you want, or maybe you just did a Google search and you're looking for one particular quote and you find it in an article and you're like, ooh, that's a good quote, I want that, or ooh, I want the concept that the author's talking about. Instead of plagiarizing, what you want to do by just copying and pasting the one sentence or doing any of the 5 things, instead what you want to do is you want to read above that sentence that you want to take and read below it. Or say if you're in a textbook and you want to talk about bail, and you're likely only going to have a subsection that talks about it, so it's going to be maybe a couple paragraphs, maybe a couple pages in one chapter. It's not going to be the whole chapter. It's not going to be the whole book. We're not going to ask you to read a 300-page textbook to write a report. Maybe you're a doctorate student. Most of you are probably undergrad students, right? We're not going to do that. So put in the extra work to read everything above and everything below it. If it's a short, maybe like you found an article and it's just a page or 2 pages or 3 pages, read the whole article, and then you don't have to worry about doing a word swap, right? Or a word jumbo or a word drop. If you find yourself doing those things because you want just the one sentence and you don't feel like you have a better way to say it, so you're going to copy and paste, and then, well, you're not going to do it. You're not going to do it now because you know better. But if you feel the need to copy and paste and then try to just do any of those 5 things, make any kind of little changes, you're still plagiarizing. You don't know the material. Okay, so find the sentence that you want, or the passage or the paragraph or the 2 paragraphs, whatever it is that you want, read everything above it, read everything below it. Now, what you can do is you can take that sentence or however much that you wanted, having the full idea of what the author is saying, right? You've gained the knowledge, you've processed it, you've input it, you're ready to output it. You can now rewrite the sentence without looking at the author's. You don't look at the original source, flip it upside down, toss it across the room, throw it at your enemy, whatever you do. Don't break any laws, but don't look at it, okay? Don't look at it. And now you can take the most important words from that one sentence that you wanted, if you'd like to, remember, put them in quotations, are 3. Quote, cite, reference. Quote, cite, reference. Say it a million zillion times until you have it. Quote, cite, reference. Okay, but now it's your own. Okay, we will get into an example of what this looks like. Okay, so again, you need to read and fully understand. Fully understand. Never try to extract just one sentence or a couple sentences from a whole entire text or from a whole article or from a whole subsection of a textbook and try to use it and pass it off as your own. It will be plagiarism every single time. So we want to mentally soak in and process what we've read. We are going to read above and below, we're going to take it in, we're going to soak it up, we're going to process it, and now we're ready to have a discussion about it from our own mind, from our own wisdom. Okay? You want to take notes. You want to take notes as you read. So, for example, with the article that's linked in the discussion below, that's what we've been using. It's an article found from Bloomberg Law, and we're using that as an example to highlight how the 6 different ways to plagiarize are done, and then we'll be using that same article as an example of how to fix it. So if you haven't already, pull up the article in the description below, and you want to read the whole article if you want to use any part of the article. Okay, read the whole thing. When you read the whole thing, you want to take notes while you're not staring at the article. Okay, so read a paragraph or a couple paragraphs or a half a page, however you want to break it down, however it makes sense for you to break it down into smaller chunks of information. Maybe read in this article, the paragraphs are really short, sometimes just a sentence or a couple sentences. So I would say maybe read 4 or 5 paragraphs and then stop. Flip the article over on a separate piece of paper, take notes on what you read in those couple paragraphs. Okay, they're going to be in your own words. They're going to have to be in your own words because you flipped the article upside down. So unless you are incredible and you are just one of those people, you memorize everything accidentally just by, if you take one little glance, you've memorized it. That is not most of us. That is certainly not me. So read a portion, read a segment. Okay, read a passage. Here, let's say maybe 4 or 5 paragraphs. Flip it upside down or push it aside. Don't look at it, and jot down notes on what you just read. Okay, jot down notes on what you just read. And then go to the next passage, which is maybe the next, maybe half the page, right? So now you do the same and you take notes. Now you have your own notes in your own words without looking at the article. Okay, and you've done the first page. So I believe there are 3 pages. So you would repeat that until you've done all 3 pages. Okay, so you're gonna write your paper based on your notes. Okay, once you finish reading the full original article or research paper, whatever it is that you're looking at to get your source, you're not going to go back to it. You've made your own notes in your own words without looking at the original source. You have no need to go back to the original source unless you're ready to get the information to quote, cite, and reference, right? Quote, cite, and reference. You also want to be making a note of these things as within your notes, right? So for me, I like to make notes on a separate page, and then when I'm done, I will have like a separate page of notes for each source. Whether or not I end up using it, if I consult 10 different sources, I have 10 different pieces of paper, and the name and all the reference material is on every paper for every source. I also have the citation, right? So the exact page or paragraph number where I got that exact material. If it's a half of a textbook page, I just want to make note of the page and that maybe the subsection name, any way that would help me go back and find it so that I don't plagiarize accidentally because, oh my gosh, I'm trying to cite, but I can't navigate back to where I started. And of course, we want to our quotation. So if you want to use a quotation. So if you did a Google search and you found a particular article or a passage and you're like, ooh, that is said beautifully, I want to use those couple words, that will be really helpful. Remember that in your notes, you can then find the couple words. Remember, do not put the whole sentence in quotation marks and call it a day, right? Find just the couple important words that you want to use. And then in your notes, put just those couple words in quotation marks. So it's okay to use those couple words verbatim. Okay? All right. Next, we want to look at an example. Okay, so I believe we're using the example that's the fourth paragraph. Again, they're really short paragraphs, but we're gonna look at number 4. And in the last video, we went over exactly how that sentence read. I want the first sentence in paragraph 4. So I did a Google search and I found that will really help my research. It will help my paper and the essay that I'm writing. So that's the sentence that I'm most interested in. However, remember that if I want just the one sentence, I need to do everything that we've just gone over in this video. Okay, so I'm not going to read just the sentence. I'm going to read everything above it, everything below it that's relevant, right? If the article gets onto another topic, or if you finish that subsection in your textbook and it starts a different topic, you don't need to do it if it's not relevant, but read everything above and below that's relevant. So what I've done is I've read above and I've read below. I'm taking notes, right, without looking at the original source. So they're completely from my own brain. They're obviously going to be my own words because I'm not staring at the words of the original article. I've made my notes. I've done everything stated above. And now I'm ready to finish up the source, right? So of course I do my quotation, my cite, and my reference material. But I'm ready. I understand the topic fully. I've read the entire article. Okay, this one, it's really short. It's 3 pages, but the paragraphs are very small and there's a lot of white on the page. The author of the article leaves a good chunk of blank in between every couple sentences. So there is more white to the page than there is black, which makes it a very quick and easy read. Now, I had a hard time when I went to just the one sentence and I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna use this. When I tried to do that, I found that I was plagiarizing, like me, with a doctorate's degree, right? Because I was like, okay, well, I just want this one sentence. And so I was looking at the sentence and I was rewording it, right? But I was doing like essentially a word swap where I'm like, oh, instead of often, I'm going to use after, and instead of the court, I'm going to say the judge. And accidentally, in trying to put it in my own words, it wasn't actually my own words. And I think, again, that's where a lot of students go wrong. They think, and they tell me when they get caught and they're like, but it's in my own words. And like, no, it's not. Like, if you're staring at the original words of the author, I promise you, it will never, 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 never be in your own words. Like, even if you try to swap out every single word, you're going to get a sentence that makes absolutely no sense. No one can make sense of it. Like, it will end up too close to the author's words. It won't be in your own words. To me, something is not in your own words unless you've read everything, you've gained in wisdom, you have an understanding of the topic, you're ready to have a full discussion or debate on it. So if you can sit down and debate with a classmate about your subject, again, you're ready. You're ready, you know your material. If you do not, you've likely plagiarized. So I caught myself doing it. So it's very easy to do. And again, if you've been a student for a while and maybe your professor has not been running plagiarism checks, you might have gotten away with it for a while, but I promise you that sooner or later, you're gonna get caught, and there is a punishment for the very first time. So just be careful, okay? Just be careful, do it the right way. I'm not saying be careful and don't get caught. I'm just saying do it the right way, right? Again, we wanna be ethical with our writing. Okay, so let's look at an example now. So what I did, so again, I read above and I read below, and now I'm ready to take the first sentence from the first paragraph, but again, my paper's upside down. I'm not looking at it, I'm ready to write my sentence, okay? I want to incorporate the main concept from the first sentence of the fourth paragraph, but I wrote my sentence without looking at it. Okay, so I read the whole article. What I really want is I want something that's going to talk about search, and I want an example of what a search, like a legal search, right? The legal rule definition of a search as it applies in an example. Okay. We talked about, again, what that verbatim sentence was in the last video. So in this video, I'm just going to tell you what my example of in my own words, again, from my own brain, not in my own words because I tried to do any of the 5 from the last video where I swap things and rearrange things and drop things, completely from my own brain. Okay, here's what I got. I wrote, because officers used 24/7 recordings mounted to public utility poles, they were able to get a search warrant and found crystal methamphetamine in defendant Tugel's home. Okay? I had to write it really tiny to get it on my note paper, but because officers used 24/7 recording cameras mounted to public utility poles, they were able to get a search warrant and found methamphetamines in defendant Tugel's home. Okay, now notice that is in no way related to a copy and paste and a word swap or switch or jumble of the original sentence. Okay, that in no way does that. Okay, because again, I wrote that sentence after reading the whole article, knowing what I wanted to use from the article, flipping the article upside down, writing my sentence, then incorporated what was above it and what was below it. And I got my perfect sentence. It is not plagiarized, it is from my own brain. So it's not even, it is my own words, but it's my words using my own thoughts, ideas, and concepts inspired by the author. So what will I do to this sentence? What else will I do to it to keep it from being plagiarized? Okay, well, if I put just my sentence and do nothing else, I have plagiarized, right? Even though it's mostly my own words, and I'll show you what I did. And it's my own ideas, thoughts, and concepts, like from my brain, not looking at the paper. I failed to do the 3 elements, right? The 3 elements that are required to avoid plagiarism. Okay, well, if you notice first, again, I mentioned that I read above and I read below. Well, if you notice, in the paragraph right above, in paragraph 3, it uses the words 24/7 recordings. Okay, it uses that verbatim, 24/7 recordings. Now, I want an example of what a search is, right? Or what the author of this article, who is clearly not a legal professional, because in my opinion, the whole article is just, it's so off base, but that's not the point, right? So if I want to use the words 24/7 recording, that was verbatim, right? Notice that my entire sentence, not one part of it is verbatim from what the article says. Again, there's no way it could be. I flipped the article upside down. But I do want to use 24/7 recording. I do want to use that verbatim. So what do? I want to use, and let's go back to the definition, right? If you use anyone else's words, you must give them credit by using quotations, citation, and a reference, right? So by now you know these 3 things, right? Quote, cite, reference, quote, cite, reference, quote, cite, reference, right? Those 3 things. So I'm using someone else's words. I'm using 3 words, right? I guess if 24/7 is 1 word, and then recordings. So I'm gonna quote, right? So notice I'm not using the entire sentence and putting quotation marks on it, because I'm only using those 2 words. So the words 24 and recordings, so I'm going to put a quotation mark before the 24/7, and then, so it's going to say, quote, 24/7 recordings, and then end quote. Okay, so start quote, end quote around 24/7 recordings. Those are the only verbatim words that I'm using. I put them in quotation marks. At the end of that sentence, I'm now going to do a citation to show that I got the original thoughts, concepts, and ideas from that Bloomberg Law article. Okay, so it didn't originally come from my brain, like it came out of my brain, but I had to go somewhere to learn the knowledge. So where did I learn the knowledge? I'm going to give credit to the author of this article, okay, because the author of this article educated me and I need to give it credit. So I use a quotation, right? What else do? I must have a citation and a reference. So at the end of that sentence, again, the sentence is, because officers used, quotation mark, 24/7 recording cameras mounted to public utility poles, they were able to get a search warrant and found crystal methamphetamine in defendant Tugel's home. Okay, so before I put my period, that is the end. That's all I'm using from that article, right? So I'm not using anything else from the article, so I'm done with that article. I am now going to, before I put my period at the end, I'm going to put my parentheses, and I'm going to put the last name of the author, comma, and the year. Okay, so the last name of the author, the comma, and the year. Now, depending on what style guide your college uses or what your program uses, it might be a little bit different. So absolutely follow the instructions of your professor. But for me and my students, I have students in all kinds of different backgrounds and programs, and they all use something different, and there's no way to accommodate everyone. So I just say for mine, everyone just use the author's last name, comma, the year, right? So the year of the article publication in this case. So I would do that at the end of this passage, at the end of the sentence, because that's all I'm using from this article, and I'm done with this source. So I put that citation information, then I put my period. Okay? At the end of my paper, maybe at the bottom of the essay or on another page, whatever your instructor tells you to do, I would then have my list of references, and I'm going to include the full reference material. So again, follow the style guide that your program is using. If you're one of my students and it's not a research class, I just tell you, like, if you're using your textbook, you can just say textbook. We're only using one, right? If you're using this exact article, you can put the name of the article, the author's last name, just all that, again, just the information to help readers find your article. And for me, if I want to try to make sense of what you're saying, or I want to see this article, or if what you're saying is completely wrong and I'm like, there's no possible way this article could have said that, and I want to look it up myself because I want to know, like, are you making up your research and just putting references so that it looks like you researched and you're just making stuff up? Like, I want to go and look it up. Like, sometimes, especially when articles talk about the law and they're not written by lawyers or legal professionals with advanced legal degrees, they get it really wrong, and students rely on that, and they write research and they write completely bad research papers. The research is bad. But sometimes it's not the student. Sometimes the student adequately did research and just came across a bad article. And that happens. It happens. That's not something you're going to get penalized for. Unlikely, not in any of my classes. As long as you're not plagiarizing, like, that's a great first step. Okay, so hopefully you can see what I did with my example and how I was able to fix the plagiarism. So again, I started off looking at the passage and then trying to, as I was writing it, I tried to just change each word as I did it, and instantly I probably got not even 3 words into my own sentence before I'm like, oh my gosh, like, this isn't even like, it's not humanly possible to be staring at a set of words and to completely, as you're writing it, generate totally different words that isn't going to be traced back to that. So I tried it. I can tell you it is not possible. So follow all the steps in this video, and I promise you will not end up with plagiarized material. Okay, so feel free to use my sentence as an example. Try this several times on your own. Practice. Just find an article on your own, read the whole article. Feel free to practice with short articles if you're limited on time, and practice just taking notes, turning the article upside down, practicing coming up with the sentence that you want, or the paragraph that you want, or however much you want to extract from that article, and just practice writing sentences. You'll see once you give it a try that it's not difficult, and you'll have some great knowledge at the end, which is always the key. Okay, so that's it for this video. If you would like to share what you learned from this video in the comments below, I would love to hear what you learned.